here we are today with our, and once again, Arizona drag racing legend. He's you don't become a legend, be a new legend, because you earned that as through your life through the sport. But Jim Basko, Arizona drag racing, our newest Arizona drag racing legend, Arizona Drag Racing Hall of Fame member, car builder, engine builder, fuel car tuner. Resume goes on and on and on. Jim, welcome.
Thank you.
We get to know you a little bit. Where were you born?
I'm a native of Arizona, born at Good Sam, like a lot of people. Grew up in the Valley of the Sun.
So you got to start. You didn't have to move here, and you got it here. So
my parents moved out here in 1948 to get away from the snow in Chicago. My father put himself through law school on a golf scholarship, and in Chicago, you can only play golf about 3 months out of the year. And he heard about this place called Arizona where you can play year-round. So he moved his family out here and started playing golf, and met a gentleman selling life insurance and made a career out of it. Provided for our family very well.
And the power of networking on a golf course.
Exactly.
The great thing. It's kind of like being in a drag race.
Pretty much.
So your dad was into golf,
Mm-hmm.
so he wasn't a drag racer.
Not at all.
How did you get bit by the bug?
You know, I guess a couple things. First, I have to say my father never changed the oil in a car in his life. I don't know that he ever picked the hood up on a car. So I don't know how I got involved in it, other than the fact that my brother took me to Beeline, 1967. And I thought, this is pretty cool. You know, I was just a young kid at the time.
12, 13 years old?
Yeah, pretty much. And I thought, this is fun. I took a bunch of pictures. I still have those pictures. I should have brought those. I didn't. So I was kind of a little bit hooked at that point. And I thought, when I get my driver's license, this is what I want to do. And, 15 years and 7 months, you're able to get your permit. Went, and that day I had to have my permit, and, started driving. And, of course, with my parents, I didn't do anything that I shouldn't. Well, not too often. So I started going out to Beeline, and my first car was a 1959 Anglia. Not the cool looking Anglia. It was more of a little coupe thing. It wasn't acceptable for racing. Second car, I ended up with a Ford Falcon. Ford Falcon had a small block Ford in it, and I would drive it out to the races. And I ran into a gentleman out there, which some of you probably know, a guy named Arlen Stewart. And he says, well, why aren't you racing your car? And I went, well, I don't know anything about racing. He's like, well, let me show you how to do this. So this was at one of the AHRA big races at Beeline. And he says, well, we got to figure out what class your car is in, and they figured it all out. And it turns out that I was in the same class as Dennis Kucera's wife. And I'm trying to think what her name was. Anyway, we ran for class, and I ended up beating her. And I didn't know it. Arlen says, well, you need to go up front there and pick up your trophy. And I went, trophy? What am I going to do? So I went up, and that was the first trophy I ever won, first race I ever won. And it was just class. It wasn't really a race. So I'm admiring this trophy, thinking, this is really cool. But I can't take this home. There's just no way. If my parents found out how I got this, it'd be over with. Well, I took it and I put it in the trunk of my car, and it sat there for probably 6 months. And eventually my sister walked by when I had the trunk open, and she saw that in there. And I was busted. It was all over with at that point. So they found out what I was doing, and while Dad didn't really appreciate it much, Mom, she supported me 100%. And kind of moved on from there, and I ended up buying another 55 Chevy that we raced for a short period of time, and then we bought the other 55, and we raced it for quite a bit, and that was kind of the start of the thing, and moved on from there.
So this is So you went to East High School, I know that.
Yes, I did.
And in high school, how old were when you won your first class race? Were you in high school still, or
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, I got my license in '69, my driver's license in '69. I think the first race was '72 that I won when I went out there. And so, yeah, I had been going since '67, raced at '69, but didn't really win anything until then, and that was only because I had some guidance, people telling me what to do and how to do it. So that's how that happened.
So you, in high school, were there any other people from East that you went racing with? Or?
Well, Randy Ingram, Randy's romper, they lived right up the street there. Him and his sister, they both went to school at East. There was a few other racers that they weren't really quite as diehard as like the Ingrams were, but I admired them because they had a cool car and it ran really well, and I thought that's the class that I want to run, and that's the car that I want to try to beat. I don't know that we ever went as fast as they did, but we had a lot of fun doing it. I took a partner in on a car, and that's who we ran that 55 with. But
so
yeah,
you were racing your own cars.
Mm-hmm.
And you kept going forward in it, and then what was the next step? And
well, I didn't. I like a lot of people. I didn't have a lot of money to do this, so I had to do most of the work myself. And I ended up getting a job in a machine shop, John Scott's Engine Service, and I worked there for a number of years. And it was a great place to work. A lot of fun. I got to meet a lot of really cool racers, Larry being one of them. He doesn't remember that.
Larry Spitali.
Yeah. And we did work for Watley's, and we did work for just about everybody at some point in time. So I got a lot of really good experience. Some of it not so good, but hey, it's all experience. And I ended up leaving that job for, I don't know, some other reasons. And I ended up going down and working for Jim McCormick at J&J Speed. And when I was working for him, there was a guy who used to come into the shop all the time, and he was always buying parts, and he always had a wad of money. And I thought, well, that guy, I don't know what he does, but he's doing something, must be right. Turns out he had a rental yard. That was Richard Smith, or Smitty's Rentals. And he was buying race cars left and right, and just buying all kinds of stuff. And he says, my driver doesn't want to drive this Vega anymore. He'd only driven it a couple races, and he says, you need to come down and take a look at it. And I went down there, and it had this thing in it. It was called a Lenco. And I'm like, man, I've never seen anything like that before. He says, well, would you be interested in driving it? And I went, I don't know. So we ended up going out to Phoenix Dragway, in fact. And I made the first couple laps in it, and I thought, man, this is heaven. I really enjoyed that. So I was 19 years old at the time. The next weekend, we had got a entry form from Bob DeYoung. Bob was working at Chuck Speed Center at the time for a race in Carlsbad. So we loaded everything up, and we drove over to Orange County the day before the race at Carlsbad. And I think the first time I let the clutch out on that car, it went 960 or something like that. It was ridiculously fast. A lot of fun.
That was traction, good air, everything all at once.
It was a track that I didn't even believe they made tracks that nice.
Beautiful track. Absolutely.
So we ran really good there, and then we ended up the next day. We went to Carlsbad and qualified well, but it was kind of like a bracket race, and I was out first round. But great experience. And in the meantime, he had bought several other cars, and I raced for him for a number of years out at Beeline. And that's all I did, exclusively race for him for the next 3 years. Actually made enough money racing races out at Beeline where I was able to support myself. That was almost unheard of at the time, but I won a lot. And Rick Lynch liked me. When it came payout time, he'd always give me a little extra money. They always enjoyed our
No,
cars out there.
That's fantastic. It's, nice you to say that. Not everybody saw that side of him.
No, they didn't. But the bottom of the tower, there was a little room down there with a big guard with big guns, and that's where all the cash was. And
Right by the staircase.
yeah, exactly. Yep. So I got to spend a lot of time in that room because I did well. Anyway, so unfortunately, things didn't work out so well in the end with that whole racing operation. And I still wanted to race. I still enjoyed building motors.
I know this kind of was a tough time, but I think what you've done is that you inspired a lot of people. You went through some diversity with that car. There was an accident, a mechanical accident.
Well, I didn't have an accident with Richard's cars.
Oh.
I was actually in the interim during a period of time that I had quit racing for him, and I was going to get ready to start doing my own racing. I was driving a car for Bud Yancer.
Okay, yeah.
And out at Beeline, and something happened, mid-track or at the finish line or something like that. It was a normal pass, didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. I looked down to turn the switches off for the ignition, and there was just a little ball of fire there, and that little ball turned into a big one. Don't really know what happened. I don't know if I ever got the switches or not, but I slid the car to a stop. I basically opened the door, tried to bail out. We had those window nets at the time. Couldn't get out. First hit. Second hit, I got out. And, this was a period of time when they were teaching all of us young kids, and I was not that young, but I was young enough. You're supposed to stop, drop, and roll if you're on fire, which is exactly what I did. I rolled out on the ground, rolled around a little bit, stood up, and my feet were flames still coming off my feet. So I ran over the side of the track, and I put my feet out and stood up, and I thought, I saw skin hanging off and everything, and I thought, this is not good. I said, I'm probably going to end up going to the hospital, but I'll probably be home tonight. Well, that didn't happen. I spent the next 6 weeks in intensive care. Nearly lost me a couple times, but I made it through. I was a fighter. I wasn't going to give up. That wasn't going to get me.
That's amazing that you went through that, and I remember we were all praying for you, and it was pretty. I wasn't down that end of the track, but you knew something was bad down there when it happened. And the fact that you fought through that speaks a lot about you as a person and about your passion for living.
A little side note to that is 3 days prior to this accident, I opened the doors of the business for the first time. Chances of surviving at that point, next to nothing. Surviving the business, next to nothing. And fortunately, my brother-in-law stepped up and went in and started running my business.
Right.
Yep, Ray. And he's never turned a machine on or anything like that in his life. But between him and Bud Yancer, they figured out how to make enough money so I could make the first payment that came up 30 days later. And not to throw fuel on a fire, but 12 days after that, my father passed. So I'm laying in the hospital thinking, this is not good, and now my dad's gone. This is a little rough start, but we pushed through, kept going, and next year it took a year for me to be able to get back to the point where I could do any type of machine work again. Mainly because I had no skin on my hands or anything like that. I couldn't touch anything. If I'd touch it, I'd be bleeding. But put it back together, kept going, worked really hard, and here I am 45 years later, still have that business, same business. It's been a pretty good business. You can make a living. You're never going to get rich, but you get to meet the best people in the world, and that makes it all worthwhile.
Well, you recover from that, and you didn't lose the passion of racing.
Nope.
Matter of fact, it was probably more embedded in you when you're probably recovering and you're going,
oh, my mind's working all the time.
how can we go? I want to go racing.
Absolutely.
So what's your next car after that? That was the Bud's was a notchback Vega or something
Yes.
like that? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. The next car in 1981, I started the business in 78. 1980, I started building another car, a 1981 Camaro. I took a partner in the car, a guy named Kenny Baus, and we went over to Northern California and picked up a chassis, and there's stories that could go on forever about all this stuff, but picked up a chassis, came back, put the body together, put it on there, built that, realized it didn't have a trailer, so built a trailer to put it in, and started racing again, pro stock. That was my choice. That was the only class that I really wanted to run, and we did really well with the car. We ran back then. They ran divisional races. They actually ran pro stock and then division, so we did pretty good with that. Had a lot of fun, and they also ran regional races, which were there was an eastern region and western region. We ran the western region. In '81, I think I finished second in the western region. Chasing all over the country. We raced everywhere on the West Coast, all the way as far as Brainerd, Minnesota, Indy. All these were on the.
You had some tough hitters. You just in the West.
I lost to Lee Shepard. So
there you go.
They don't get better than that.
Well, in Arizona, you had was Kevin Roddy.
Kevin Roddy, yeah.
And Gordy.
Yep.
So I mean, we had some. You guys were like our flag carriers for the state of Arizona in pro stock.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I just considered myself to just be a normal guy that was trying to do something that probably shouldn't be doing. Couldn't afford it, but I wasn't going to give up. I said, just keep going, push on.
So you with that car, the 81.
Mm-hmm.
You ran that for a while.
Yep.
And then
I ended up buying another chassis from the same outfit. Put that together and ran it for a couple of years. And I had a little problem with that, doing some tire testing out at Firebird. And ended up losing that car, and I didn't get hurt. These cars are pretty safe. Where did I go next? After that, I built another car. I know what I did. After I crashed that car, I took it, put it in the trailer. I didn't open the trailer for a month. When I finally opened the trailer up, it was kind of a mess. I drug everything out, took the engine out of the car, the transmission rear end, threw the rest of it in the dumpster. And had a gentleman walk into my shop, and he saw the engine on an engine stand. He says, that would really look good in my boat. And I went, yeah, maybe it would. What I didn't realize is he was going to come and steal it from me. Broke into the shop and stole that engine.
I remember that.
You remember that? Yeah. So it took me about a year to get it back, to find it. I figured out who it was. It was a customer that had come in. So anyway, we ended up recovering that. And in the meantime, I was building another car, Pontiac Firebird, and I knew some of the principal people at Pontiac, and they were helping me out a little bit with some parts and stuff that you can't get. So I had a little bit of an advantage there on some of that. And we put another car together and ran it for a while. Then I put another one together and ran it. 2 different Pontiac Firebirds, and I'm trying to think. I think I ended up selling those off, and we ended up with a Olds Cutlass, which was that was my last pro stock car, and it was the nicest car. You start with the cheap stuff, and you keep moving up and moving up. And I moved up to this Cutlass, and it was really a nice car. It was a Cadillac to drive, lots of fun. Did fairly well with it. Never won anything to speak of. Finally, just got to the point where I couldn't afford to do it anymore, and I just had to park it. Then I had a guy who we were building an engine for, and he says, "Why don't you put the engine in your car and go PSCA racing?" So I went, well, I'm kind of anxious to try to do something again, so I'll try that. So we put an engine back in the old car, drug it up to Vegas and ran a few of their races up there, and did really well. I just had a good time doing it. The PSCA was Pacific Streetcar Association. Most of those guys weren't into reaction times or anything like that. So even though I may not have had the fastest car, most of the time I could get around them. Other than that, that's about it.
Tell them what a whole shot was all about. You taught everybody, the other racers, how to lead.
Well, yeah, when going back to the early days, even in AHRA, there were no reaction times, but you knew if you could leave before the next guy, there was, you'd have a little bit of an advantage. So we worked on that.
So through this whole period before you, there's another great story, what you've done since you've been behind the wheel. I'm very impressed with. But who did you like to race against back in the pro stock days? Who did you beat one time or twice or three times that you took pleasure in?
I can't say that there was anyone specific. I will tell you that we were at Indy one year, and you know the Ewell brothers. I can remember Mark Ewell came over to me and he says, Basko, he says, we go out and run 770. He says, you go 560. He says, I don't know why. How can you always be a tenth ahead of us? And that wasn't always the case. Most of the time they were ahead of me, but there was some periods of time where I could run pretty much with the best of them, and that meant a lot to me. I mean, that was a big pat on my back. I like racing with all of them. There's a guy out of Erie, Pennsylvania, a guy named Bill Shorts. Every time we'd go back to Indy, we'd run into their whole family, and it was a family operation. He's just recently passed. I knew his daughters. There's just a lot of things on their family that, it was a cool family to be around. And unfortunately, there's just been a lot of tragedy in their family too. I don't know. Everyone that was involved in racing. I mean, when you're in an engine business, you're building engines for a lot of different people, and
the pro stock got you a lot of notoriety as being an engine builder.
Yeah, pretty much.
I know one time we were racing a national event at Firebird Wild Horse Pass, and we had a problem with the cylinder head, and it pulled the stands out of the head and the rock arm stands, and it needed to be welded and fixed. And you guys, you and Ray just jumped right in, and we got it welded up and fixed. You took it, we had it back on the car the next day, and we beat Ron Neff the next round. And it was a pretty big deal. I mean, that was all part of, we beat somebody who's really a good racer running Comp Eliminator. Mm-hmm. And but it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you guys saying, hey, let's get that fixed.
The gift of giving is a wonderful thing. And anytime you can help someone out, I know that I've done enough bad things in my life that I can use all the attaboys I can get.
That's true for all of us. So you raced the Ols.
Yep.
And then it's time you reach the level of, okay, so I know there's a gap, which I'm not I know that you ended up being a fuel car tuner. How did that happen?
That's another story altogether, but basically I was semi-retired from racing, and John Powers called me, and he says, Basko, he says, I want you to come and tune my fuel car. I said, John, I know nothing about nitro whatsoever. Did you ever know Dan Gear? I don't know if you knew him or not.
Well, yes, absolutely know.
Okay.
That's from John Scott. That's when you knew him.
Yep.
John Scott.
We worked together there. Yeah. Anyway, Dan and I were very good friends. In fact, I credit him being my second father. We'd talk for hours and hours and hours about engines. And he wanted to talk about nitro, and I wanted to talk about gasoline. Well, I should have listened to him when he was talking about the nitro, but it didn't interest me. Anyway, fast forward, John Powers calls me and he says, I want you to come run my car. I said, John, I don't know anything about nitro. He says, don't worry, Basko, I'll teach you. Well, he taught me a lot of things, mostly a lot of things and what not to do. But we had fun. We enjoyed it. John was certainly capable of running a car. We had the best equipment there was. Struggled with some things, but in the end it was a lot of fun. While I was doing that, I got to meet a lot of the other racers that were racing the nostalgia cars, And I worked for a short period of time for Jim Broom down in Tucson, and we won a couple races. And there was one race down in Tucson where it was a double header, where 2 separate races, 2 separate nights. And one night we won, and the next night these guys from Canada won, this Ron Hodgson Chevrolet. And I thought, well, you know what? They've got a pretty nice operation, and they seem to be well funded. I need to keep my eye on those guys. And I raced a couple more races with Jim Broom down there, and you know, it was okay. You know, it was fun, but you know, he didn't want to go as many races as I would have liked to have gone, and he didn't want to try the things that I wanted to try. And this was a period of time when Roland Leong was working for Ron Hodgson, tuning his car, and he decided to quit. And I talked to the guy who was running the car, Bob Papernick, and you know, I said, you know, I would be interested in working with you guys. And we went to Vegas for the first race with that car, Ron Hodgson Chevrolet. And I walked into the pits, and they basically said, there you go, do whatever you want. And I'm like, well,
Wow.
Okay. I said, well, where are the records? He said, well, there's no records. I said, well, what do I do here? We don't know. So I walked into that race, and I pretty much stunk up the whole racetrack. It was bad. I had no idea what to do with it. I mean, I had some stuff from Powers, but it didn't really cross
It doesn't
over.
apply, right?
No.
Yeah.
So after that, I started paying more attention to what I was doing, and I went back to some of the Powers stuff, and I ended up putting Powers, the tune-up that I had in Powers, I put it into the Hodgson car, and they've been gracious enough to allow me to do my crazy stuff ever since. And you know, we set both ends of the record, ET and mile an hour in Nostalgia Funny Car. The car runs pretty darn good. In 2017, we won the World Championship. COVID kind of knocked the wind out of our sail, pretty much everybody. So we set out a couple years. I was pretty much done, and I kept watching the races, and I said, you know what, I'm not done. You know, I still like to try this again. So I called Ron, and I said, Ron, what are you doing? He says, I don't know. He says, I'm thinking about ordering a new car. He says, are you in? I said, I don't know. I said, let me think about it. And he says, well, let me know. He says, because I want to know. I'm not going to order a car unless you do it.
Wow.
I said, okay. So I called him back a couple weeks later. I said, we need to do this. And he says, we're on it. And it was done. We ordered a car. I put this newest car together. I should back up because Bob Papernick and I put another car together prior to this. That's the one we won the championship with. Fast forward now, last year we put this newest car together. Again, it's another Victory race car. A little controversial because, you know, we try some aerodynamic things that are different. We try some fuel system things that are different. You know, Ron's always had pretty flashy paint jobs. This car's painted like the Bubble Up car, which is, you know, that was his car from day one. A lot of people don't know that he was involved in that, but he owned all that stuff. You know, Gordy Bonin and Jerry Verhol, they were on his payroll for all those years, and they were a very successful team out of Canada. And I'm trying to carry that banner for him. It's a little tough at times, but you know, we do the best we can do. So that's what I'm doing now. You know, I have a good time doing it. It's not gasoline at all. Nitromethane was never intended to be a motor fuel. It's a cleaning solvent at best, and I don't know that it's even good.
Dry cleaning to clean the dry cleaners.
Exactly.
You know, Jim, you've had a great run in. You know, I watched you and admired you a lot because as much as I wanted to race, I could only do so much with my budget. And you got a lot out of what you guys, heart, blood, sweat, and tears. You guys got a lot of stuff out of you. You achieved a lot in pro stock racing. It's not the easiest. I'm going to go out and be a world champion, football player, and it just doesn't happen without a lot of hard work. And even with the hard work, you don't always achieve it, but what you learn from it, you take away from it. and that makes the character of the man. And both you and Ray, and then the early days with Kenny Basko, you know, Godspeed, Kenny. We miss you, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys were there, and everything. One thing leads to another. Your fuel stuff is fantastic. You guys ready for a new season in 2023?
Absolutely.
Before we end this one, you know, Dan Gear. I mean, what a great mentor. I mean, there's the guy that put 16 spark plugs in a big block Chevy.
That's right.
And the loudest car I've ever heard in my life. But he did it, and people said you couldn't do it, and he did it.
Yep.
John Scott, just you know, stalwart, and you know, did a lot of stuff on the later years in land speed racing and all that, Bonneville, and a lot of great people along your way. Is there anybody?
As far as people that have helped me, Ray's been with me by my side since day one. I give him all the credit in the world. I wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for him.
Yeah.
You know, the guy's he's been the world to me. Obviously, you know, there's just all the customers and the friends and you know, they all have a special meaning to me. I would be leaving too many people out if I started naming too many names.
That's fair.
And that's just.
So you've been through a lot. The horrendous fire and the recovery from that feels to me like that was a big turning point in your life, the way you looked at things and the way you got back after it, and you're going to do it, and you did it, and you helped a lot of people out, us included. You paid it forward, and then I know that, are you still flying?
I still have a plane. That was a bucket list thing. I enjoyed doing that when I was a kid. I used to go down to Sky Harbor, and you know, the liability thing wasn't that big of a deal back then. You could hitch a ride. You go down to the executive terminal. You could hitch a ride with student pilots, and they'd fly you around the valley. And I loved that, but I knew I could never afford it. Well, when I turned 55, I said, you know, if you're ever going to do it, now's the time. So I went out and I bought a plane before I had any medical or anything, and did all my training, and ended up selling that, bought another one, and yeah, I still have it. I don't fly it very often anymore. If you know anyone that wants a plane, give me a call.
There's a plane like
it's like a boat. It's exactly like a boat.
Yeah,
two of the best days of your life.
Yeah, well, you impressed me by that. I know that you know you followed your passion. I'm honored to have you as a friend, and we're honored to have you here today as one of our Arizona drag racing legends.
Well, thank you very much.
And thank you. We had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you.